Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We're here to talk about ducks again today. And today we're going to talk about the appropriate fencing for your ducks. Now, the fencing that works for you and your ducks kind of depends on your situation and your setup. Now, you want to keep ducks in and you want to keep the predators out. So appropriate fencing is vital, but again, appropriate fencing varies depending on your own situation. But your fence is your first line of defense against predators. It keeps your flock from wandering off, or alternatively can be used to keep them out of areas you don't want them in, like your gardens. None of us want our ducks in our gardens destroying our crops. So sometimes, even if you free range, a fence that can keep your ducks out of your gardens can be helpful. So whatever setup you have, whatever your situation is, you can kind of figure out what type of fencing will work best for you. Now, there are a lot of options available. Go to any farm store and you're going to see dozens of different options available for fencing. It can get very, very confusing, especially if you're new to ducks or new to hobby farming in general. You just might have no idea what to buy. You're going to see things like chicken wire that is coated in vinyl. You're going to see hardware cloth. You are going to see chain link. You are going to see welded wire that is coated in vinyl. You're going to see field fence. You're going to see electric fence. You're going to see poultry mesh, whether it's electrified or not. You'll see both types usually. You'll find no-con fencing. You'll find hog panels. You'll find horse panels. You're just going to find all types of fencing options. And it can get really confusing and hard to decide exactly what you need. But what you need is entirely based on your own situation. So think about what your goals are. What are you trying to keep in? What are you trying to keep out? Predators look for easy prey. Don't give them easy prey. To know what kind of fencing will keep predators out, you have to know what predators are in your area. So we have primarily coyotes, foxes, and we have eagles and owls. Those are our four biggest threats. But beyond all of that, typically the biggest threat to a backyard flock of ducks is going to be domestic dogs. So think about how you keep your neighbor's dog out of your yard so they don't eat your ducks. That is what you're going to focus on. Because typically if you can keep out a dog, it's not as difficult to upgrade that a little bit and keep out a coyote or a fox if you have to. But assume your biggest threat is going to come from the dog down the road, because that's typically what happens. You want a really strong perimeter fence of some type if you're doing a perimeter fence. If you are going to do a perimeter fence at all, do it so that predators can't get in. Okay, so your neighbor's dog can't get into your backyard. You can do this by using some kind of electric. You can do it by using really strong fencing. You can do it by maybe having dogs. Maybe your dogs are your perimeter fence. There's a lot of different options. When it comes to the different types of wire you might select, the one I would say you should not pick is chicken wire. Chicken wire keeps birds in, yes, except for like a really heavy Muscovy or a pekin. They can sometimes get through chicken wire because they're just so heavy and chicken wire is not very strong. But otherwise, the chicken wire will keep your birds in, but it's not going to keep predators out. Even my rabbits can bite through chicken wire. It's just not very strong. It's not predator proof. It's really designed to contain your birds, not to keep out the predators. So chicken wire, you probably should just discard entirely unless you are only using it to contain your birds. So maybe you have a really strong perimeter fence, so you don't have to worry about predators coming into your property. So the ducks area, you're only going to use chicken wire. That's fine because you've already kept the predators out. Maybe you use some kind of other deterrent. Maybe you use livestock guardian dogs or something like that to keep the predators out of your yard. If you can keep the predators out of your yard entirely, then chicken wire might be okay. And I do mean entirely, because you can get raccoons that can get through chicken wire, skunks can get through chicken wire, possums can get through chicken wire, Weasels and rats can just go right through it. So unless you have a plan for how to keep those animals away from your duck enclosure entirely, you probably want to skip the chicken wire. Okay, it's just we don't use it either, even though we do have dogs for the larger predators. We have cats for mice and rats and stuff like that. We still don't use chicken wire. It's just not strong enough. So it does have its uses, but those uses are very limited. It's just not strong. So don't choose that. Other options, you really can just base it on what will keep out the predators you're trying to keep out. Because everything else, your things like your woven wire, your hardware cloths, your chain link, all of that will keep your ducks in. Okay? The only thing that might not is electric. Ducks have a really thick feathers, and sometimes they can go right under electric wire, and even if it brushes their backs, it still doesn't affect them. So electrifying a fence might keep the predators out, but it's not going to keep your ducks in. So even if you've electrified, you still need to make sure the fence goes all the way to the ground so the ducks can't go under it, because I promise they will. Electric and ducks generally don't work out very well. It's not that the electric hurts the ducks, it's that they don't even notice it. So if you are going with electric, know that that might deter predators, but it's not going to stop the ducks from escaping. So make sure your fencing is strong enough to keep your ducks in, because just a couple of strands of hot wire isn't going to do that. So while we're talking about different types of fencing and electric and whatnot, know that electric can deter predators, but if you don't want electric, some people really just don't. We don't have electric right now. My sister likes electric. So it really depends on what you like. If you do not like electric, just make your fence higher. Make it a no-climb fence that coyotes can't climb over. So you don't want them to be able to get their feet in the chain link, for example. You want them to have to stay on the other side of the fence. That's the point of the fence. So you can just make your fence higher. You don't have to do electric. Electric is an option on farms, but it's definitely not a requirement. Okay, if you don't like electric, or maybe you really just can't keep your electric powered, maybe it keeps grounding out or whatever, then that's fine. You don't have to do electric. You have other options. Another option that can really work well, this one's more expensive, but if you have a perimeter fence and then a second layer of fencing. So this works pretty well for people who, one, have the money to invest in basically two fences, but also if you want, for example, to be able to walk around the outside of your property in an area where your animals don't go. Okay, so maybe you want your goats and your ducks and whatever you have to not be able to go all the way to the edge of the property. So you might have a perimeter fence that surrounds your entire property, or at least surrounds your hobby farm portion of your property. And then you might have another fence a couple feet in, or even several feet in, that can kind of act as the barrier for the animals. But if you have two layers of fencing, you are just that much safer. So it is a more expensive option because you're basically building two fences, and that can be a lot. But if you do have the money, this can be a really fun option because you can have space to do paths and stuff that the animals aren't going to get all over, and you can maybe plant things that the animals can't eat because you also have these pathways. It can be a really fun option. Just know that it's not the only option. While it's a good one, it's also an expensive one. Make sure when you are building your enclosures, whether you are building coops or pens or whatever you're building, there are no gaps under the gates and the doors. One, the ducks will get out. They are very good at finding ways out. So if there's a gap under the door, under the gate, they're going to get out, even if you think they can't. If they can fit their head under the gate, they are going to fit their body. It's going to happen. Ducks are like made of water practically. If they can get their head in, they can almost flatten their body. It's really annoying. Okay? So if they can get their heads under the gate, they're going to escape. So just make sure your gates go all the way to the ground. And that also will help keep predators out. You'd be surprised what a fox can get into. You might think, fox can't fit under there, but they really, really can. It's really annoying. So just try to make sure that your gates and your doors go all the way to the ground so that there's no way for your ducks to escape that way, because they'll try. As for how high your fence needs to be to contain your ducks, it actually doesn't need to be that high. Most types of ducks, unless you have bantams like call ducks and the like, but most types of ducks don't fly. They don't even really jump as high as chickens. So you can use a shorter fence to contain your ducks than you might use for your chickens. So a duck can be easily contained in a 3-foot fence. They're not going to be able to jump over it. Unless obviously you have the flying bantams, they need a top. So if you have call ducks or another bantam breed, even a 6-foot fence won't stop them because they can fly. So if you do have a bantam breed, you're going to want to use bird mesh or bird netting over top of your run, just so that they can't fly out. This is also good to help protect your birds from things like hawks and owls, because they can't get through the bird mesh very easily. So it both keeps your smaller ducks in the pen and it keeps predators out of the pen. Especially for those smaller ducks, they're really tasty for predators because they're little and easy to catch. So it is a good idea, if you have those flighty flying breeds, those bantams, to make sure that pen is covered, because even a 6-foot fence won't contain them. They fly. But your heavier ducks, they simply not only don't fly, but they don't even jump. So chickens can jump 4 or 5 feet if they're really invested. Ducks, not so much. Ducks, most breeds are not even going to get 2 feet off the ground with a good jump, because they just can't figure it out. They're heavy, they're dense, they're not bred for flying. These guys are, a lot of them are meat birds, essentially. They are bred for that. They're too dense to get off the ground, so you don't have to worry about them escaping by going over the fence too much. Also remember that when it comes to bantams or ducklings, if you're going to have babies, they require smaller fencing. So while a field fence might keep the cayugas I have in because they can't fit through the gaps, a call duck or a duckling is going to go right through that field fencing because they're small, they're quick, they'll be gone in a heartbeat. So consider what type of duck you are containing, and consider if you're going to have babies. Remember, if they can get their head in, they are going to be able to escape. Especially ducklings. They are so streamlined, out they go. So make sure whatever you are using to contain, whether you are using a hardware cloth or a woven wire or whatever, that the birds can't get their head in the holes. If your birds, your smallest birds, can get their head in the holes, they're going to escape. So just be aware of that. And ultimately, just remember, you really have to think about what you are containing, so what type of duck you are keeping safe, and what type of predators are in your area. So we have bears as well as the foxes and the coyotes, and nothing ultimately is going to stop a bear. That's why we have the dogs. So you have to think about what your situation is, what kind of predators you might have, whether predators are going to be an issue at all, because maybe they're not for you. For some people, they're not. And kind of tailor what you are building to that, because no two people's situation are exactly the same. You want something that works for you, not something that someone online tells you have to have. So just make sure that whatever you are building or whatever you are buying works for you and for your animals, because you don't want to have to rebuild or rebuy because you didn't consider what will work best for you in the long term. That's about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. We'll see you tomorrow.